I view my son and my family as a project. And I say this with a lot of heart because when you put your family into your calendar, you prioritize them as much as you do with a project that you're passionate about. Yeah. And so for me to be able to manage family time within my calendar, I am actively prioritizing them. I'm also a very visual person. Like I can go in and see all my color-coded, projects and get an idea of the ratio of where my energy is at that week. And so if I enter a week where I'm naturally feeling like energy low, then I will change the makeup of that week.
Hello and welcome, Erica Austin at the Human CV. So lovely to have you. I'm going to take a sip with you. I am not usually a matcha person, but you made me a matcha. So good. I want to always drink what my guests are drinking, so I will be exposed to a bunch of interesting flavors, I guess.
Yeah.
So why matcha? Why not coffee?
I only have coffee once in the morning before 10:30. Otherwise, I get all like jittery and And matcha, I think, mostly because of the flavor and I think the routine of making one and setting intentions really helps me in the afternoon.
So you can drink this even in the afternoon or evening and you still feel like this nice happy energy, but not like jitter.
Absolutely. My body reacts differently to different things. So, yeah.
I love that you say you put intention setting into the routine of making a hot drink. Makes it so much more, grounding. So what intention should we be setting for our next couple of minutes together talking about skills and strengths and career choices?
I just really love how you've like set up the room and this kind of space. And I think, my brain's all like kind of already thinking about lots of different directions. So it's really cool. I love one-on-one conversations because it also, someone to kind of bounce ideas off, but also to clarify how I communicate, because oftentimes I find myself kind of thinking to myself, but then the language may or may not resonate with other people. So,
It's funny when, so I don't want to put labels or, labels on neurodivergent, ADHD, on the spectrum, but I do feel that a part of my brain is somewhere there, and I can relate to talking about A, and the brain is jumping in the background and goes to C, and then you talk to a person, they're just like, well, what about B in the middle? They can't follow. And
it will come. B will come.
So the funny thing is, so you prepared yourself by doing a human CV. That's like the cornerstone of what we will talk about today. But of course, with your brain being exploring different things, being interested in very many different things, how did you find making this human CV happen, but then also reading a little bit about who you are from a very structured space and, percentages next to it?
I really appreciated the structure and, I'm really good at following instructions.
Yeah.
So, that gave me a foundation of like, cool, I don't need to think about what I need to do, I just need to do it. But then that gave me, some, I guess, idea or framework to then start weaving some of the concepts. And I can't help but, draw diagrams, as you can see, from other bits of paper. But without this, I don't think I can actually unpack some of that to make it more relevant to how I think and how I approach things.
Yeah.
So,
structure is good. If the structure is a launch pad for a bunch of different pathways.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I always like to have the kind of like the fixed and variable, like without the fixed stuff, where it's like the containers or the skeleton to create those or hold spaces for me to deep dive. I get lost. So this is actually a really good starting point for me to sit in it and have a conversation with my brain.
play from there. I have a conversation with my brain. That's an opener right here. I often compare it when people say, I'm a creative person and I need this and this. I say, but every picture, if you are a painter, it still has a frame, and that frame doesn't really move. It gives you a nice framework, a confined space in which you can go crazy. And so maybe this helps people to also see, I have so much to offer, but how does it fit into something that's palatable and easy to present to other people? So that's why we have this as a thing. And also, I don't prepare my interview questions, so it helps me to stay on track when we're venturing off, because there are lots of tangents we could explore. I would love to start with something that I find is important, and it makes the human CV stand out, and that is, with a normal CV, we only look at where have you been, what have you done, what was your title. It's always a past focused, the past to right here, right now. But with including the Sustainable Development Goals, I wanted to really showcase, where's this person going? If they had all the money and all the people and all the resources in the world to do something, what would they fight for? Or what would they love for, if we use less violent language? You chose goal 11 and 17. Sustainable cities and communities, and then partnerships for the goals. What made you choose them? Like, what is something that comes to mind when you look at those beautiful goals?
Yeah, I mean, I bought this necklace to kind of showcase. So number 11, which is this colour here, is Sustainable Cities and Communities. I think I usually wear it on my left side because that's where it's closer to my heart. I'm trained as an architect, and I've always been interested in how we can design cities and spaces and urban infrastructures to really facilitate human connection and human, I guess, the social architecture.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, and with the journey I've taken to I guess, give up my ladder climbing career path to move to Christchurch or Tautahi almost 13 years ago now, has been really intentional of contributing to the rebuild, the physical rebuild and the social rebuild of the city. And so for me, that is where I can honour where I've come from and what I was interested in. That really gave me the foundation and the confidence to step into the space of contributing wider than just myself. And partnership for the goals is this middle one here. And I think as a multi-potentialite, as someone who have multiple different kind of, I guess, passions, but also skills, I believe I'm a leader in between, and all of the goals for me are important. I'm interested in all of the goals, but I think partnership for the goals really ties it all in together in terms of how do we, again, create spaces for people who are very interested in one or two, or prioritize as one or two goals, to start to talk to others who prioritize other goals. So that collaborative, that collective impact, I think, is where my skills and my passion lies in weaving that energy together so we can, the whole idea and the agenda is to leave no one behind. And we can only do that when everyone's coming together.
100%. I think it's such a good way of how you started to say, well, I started as an architect, but what is beyond all of this is everyone. You can't just have a city made out of only architects. There needs to be others, and they need to have different goals, and it's not sustainable if we only were to follow our own one goal. For a while, I invented something that had sustainable development goals in it as well, and I always left goal number 17 out. It was for me the foundation of everything. I didn't even see it as one specific goal. I said it has to be the foundation of everybody who is doing something along that line. I found it really tricky in the beginning to accept it as a standalone goal. But of course, there are people who are just focused on creating links and making connections. And like you used the word weaving as well, which has a big significance for me as well. When you think back of your time in architecture, which you're still probably doing in some form or another, but the typical architect, what are they missing?
I wouldn't say missing. I think the way that I see architecture and the power of architecture is to really think beyond the physical material, like I guess structures or spaces, but it's about the in-between or the void that it creates. And I think a lot of my peers going through architecture school may not have realized the power that it creates in terms of impacting how we create relationships with others, how we create intentionality or connection with the environment. And so architecture, again, is a catalyst for me to think beyond just the physical environment that people design.
Yeah.
It has its role,
yeah.
But for me it has a bigger meaning.
What are some spaces that you noticed that we could actually use more, maybe even specific to Christchurch? I'm even just an image flipped back into my head as I was asking the question. I lived in Malta for a while, and you have Chinese ancestry, and in both of those cultures it's very common to have courtyards and utilize them for connection, or even for purpose of heating or cooling the homes, you know. So they have an architectural, like, logical purpose, but also a social function. So maybe this example or any other examples, where are we not utilizing the space in between the homes, or the you know, what architects usually build to help us all to, you know, be partners for goals, or to fight for our or other itineraries that we may have.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because one of the first things that I've so just stepping back a little, my husband is now working in the architectural realm. I got him into architecture because I saw how his brain works and what he could bring to the industry. But the first ever conversation was this whole idea of positive and negative spaces. And so when we create objects, right? So if architects created objects like this, the distance in between the specific objects create a positive space where people can start dwelling. But once we start to move or adjust the distance between, it becomes a thoroughfare.
Yeah.
So it's more of a transit space, and that's what we call negative spaces. And so what I think, you know, designers, architects, even just creatives, think about, you know, how do we actually curate these, what we call architectural objects, to create more positive spaces where people can stop, pause, interact, make connections, not just within here, but with the architectural objects itself.
All right, they become part of the room, between the rooms.
Yes, so it's not just the interior, exterior, but it's the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been exploring in terms of, like, industries and communities, and how we can create more positive spaces between to be able to foster more, you know, meaningful relationships with the people in it, but also being champion or making other industries, sectors and communities more visible. And so I'm using my architectural skills in a completely different way, but it all comes back to how we organise, how we relate each of these objects in relation to each other. So, yeah.
That's amazing, because you actually just pointed out something that is true and very dear to my heart, and that's like you using your architectural skills in different industries and different functions. And so what my wish was when I thought about starting this and having conversations with people is that, let's imagine you have a young son as well. So let's say you know, if Jay is 14, 15, and he's like, oh, Mom, what am I supposed to do in this world? You might sit down with him and say, oh, it's going to change a lot, you know, and we don't know what jobs you will do in the future. And so even giving him that confidence at that early stage where he might say, oh, nothing is in my CV just yet, because I'm just starting. But giving the people who watch this with your story and other stories as well, the confidence that you can learn something, and even if you do not do what you initially started doing, it is useful. And it actually gives you a different perspective on the things you're currently working on. So when I look at some of the things in your human CV, and we started with the goals, we talked about let's go for the start with 16 personalities. We was used to be known as Myers-Briggs as well, Myers-Briggs type indicator. When you saw that result, the advocate, which is INFJ, so introverted and feeling focused, what was your thoughts? Did it resonate with you? Have you had some, oh yeah, this is new? What came up when you saw that result?
I think it resonated with me quite well. And I've done this test a few years ago, and it was INFJ, but it was just kind of on the cusp of introvert, and just upon reflection, just looking at the human CV and reminding myself of my journey, you know, the idea of shifting from E to I has been an interesting journey, because the more that I know myself and the more that I understand where my energy comes from, it's definitely more of an introvert-led, extrovert-expressed way of interacting with people. Like this is my favorite way of interacting. Like it still takes a bit of my energy out, but then this is where I get kind of recharged in terms of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that NFJ has come up again in its stage, because, you know, I think I've come from a place where I know the structures, I know my goals, I am very clear and driven about what I need to do.
Yeah.
But the N and the F really is about listening, it's about whakarongo, it's about understanding what's actually going on to then respond to what the need is. And so the combination of the advocate, I think breaking that down in terms of, you know, visionary, idealistic and compassionate, I think those words resonate with me a bit more. The advocate itself, I'm still kind of unpacking what that really means.
It could be used in different ways. And I personally think, if I think of a typical advocate stereotype, I would have an extrovert person showing up in my brain as a picture. So I love how you broke it down and you say, well, you're introvert-led but extrovert-expressed. So, and then you even included this beautiful te reo word, whakarongo, which I think is your word of the year, which means listening, but not in our Western way of listening. It's listening with all your senses, right? Yeah. How did you come about choosing that word? What brought that to you? Yeah,
it's also an interesting journey. I started with this whole idea of choosing a word of the year, which I've actually written down since 2013. Yes, I have.
Oh, look at you.
And it's one of my reflective practices that I've kept. And because of my multiple kind of interest, it's very hard to set specific goals. And I'm such a, you know, achiever in terms of like, if I set something, I need to achieve it, and I need to be able to, you know, tick it off or, you know, finish it off or complete it. But because I know how like fluid and, you know, flexible I need to be able to adapt to all of the different contexts and situations that come up within a year, I've gone with a theme of the year, which distilled into a word to really capture the energy, the intention, and how I can weave that into everything that I do and how I show up in the world in that year. But each year it builds on top, right?
Of course.
And so, whakarongo was the first time I've used a te reo Māori word, because I started off with, you know, English specific, you know, like transition and strengthen, leadership, inclusion. But after alignment in 2022, community in 2023, I started to think, how can I be more intentional in becoming tangata titiriti, which is grounded in the Te Ao Māori realm and understanding more about Indigenous practices and how I can be an ally for that space. And for me to be able to do that, it is about whakarongo, it is about listening with all of our senses, feeling and tuning into how we respond in this really difficult, you know, climate. And hence why I'm wearing my pounamu as well, to constantly remind me that I need to be an ally within all of the spaces. And for me to intentionally weave that into my reflective practice, whakarongo was a guiding kupu word for me to constantly remind myself how I can show up for our Māori whānau and communities and stand with them.
Thank you. It's a theme I've witnessed in myself and in many of my friends who are foreigners to New Zealand, to Aotearoa. And usually after the initial, not culture shock, but culture exploration in general, what's New Zealand all about? There is often, I don't want to call it a phase because it implies that this is just a passing thing, but there is maybe an internal movement or stirring of, I want to know more about the Aboriginal people of this land. I want to know about their practices and their ways of thinking, and clearly it also has caught you. The Maori bug has flown past, and you're like, oh wait, I want to really listen deeply and use Te Reo Maori words and understand some of the practices. For the people who are watching this who are not familiar with New Zealand and some of the original people that lived on this land, there are various things in which most organizations are now including some of the things, let's say mihi mihi or certain ways of being. What have you observed? I know it's totally off tangent now from the topic of human CV, but it's clearly dear to your heart, especially with choosing a Te Reo, a native language word for your word of the year. What have you already observed that we're doing really well in including some of the Maori principles, practices, tikanga, what do you call tikanga? Practices,
I wouldn't say I'm an expert in it. I'm definitely a learner in the space, and I want to make sure people understand that, when I say my word of the year, it's really a guiding principle, so I'm not claiming a Māori kupu to be, my word.
Oh, no.
It's more to be intentional about how I show up. And I really want to focus on, when people use honouring te tiriti in their mahi or their kaupapa, is really around how do we actually do that well, and how do we actually make sure that it is with tangata whenua, people who are of this land, and not just us going, oh yeah, like self-righteous, like I'm already learning te reo, I'm already like understanding culture, I'm already like, I am honouring it.
Yeah.
It's actually about sitting on the sidelines, knowing the stuff, doing a lot of your research, doing a lot of your own learning, so you can shine a light on the work that tangata whenua, mana whenua are already doing, and by supporting them. So it's actually about how do we step out of the spotlight and into the shadows, or into, sideline, and watching them and creating spaces or creating a stage for them. So that's kind of what I've been going on a journey on, is really intentionally making space for myself to learn, but also creating space to be inviting others to join.
Yeah.
And every year I go and with a collective, humans that I work with in a lot of different mahi, we spend time around matariki, and also at the end of the year on noho marae to wānanga, to learn from each other, to deep dive, to kind of unpack, to debate. Again, we're not experts in the space, but we're intentionally carving out space and time to have these conversations. Yeah,
that's really good points. I really like the word you just chose in saying carving out time, because it just reminded me so much of the traditional Maori art. Has to do with carving, whether it's the pounamu, the greenstone that you're wearing, or whether it's the carvings that are usually on the outside of a marae, and they are made in wood and often adorned with paua shells and other nature materials. So it's a good carving time. It's dedication. It takes perseverance. You don't just carve something in a minute. It really makes people work hard for something, and it makes me become aware that you had also perseverance in your top 5 strengths. I know you and me, we bonded over many topics in the strengths bubble, but what we are usually talking about would be Gallup or Clifton strengths. They have been renamed. Until literally 2 days before I gave my developer the final go-ahead with building the tech behind making this human CV possible, spitting out a soft skills CV after people put in a few tests. Until 2 days before the go, I had the Gallup strengths in there, but my main value was, can we make it free and fast and easily accessible for everybody? And so Gallup, which costs a little bit of money, it's not expensive at all, had to go, and the VIA strengths, equally well researched, came in. Yours showed up, the top 5 perseverance, just like a carver. Now, you said before, I'm a multi-potentialite. I'm a person who loves all different things. And I can also see curiosity here. How do you marry these up? How can you be curious about everything and still accomplish and persevere? And like an achiever in the Gallup strengths, we both share the achiever must finish this thing. You know, we don't go to bed until the to-do list is ticked off. How do you combine that? How do you even marry those two up in your beautiful brain and body that you can say, I can be curious about a million things and I also persevere?
That's an interesting journey because, as you know me, like I have a million things going on, but a lot of people think that everything happens at the same time, but it doesn't. So it's about making sure that I'm organized and, you know, with my kind of a ranger hat on to be able to again, create space for me to learn stuff, but then actually being able to translate and implement what I've learned into action. And I think that's where I don't even know how to say it. Perseverance happens when you take something that you've learned and being able to go, actually, I need to find an opportunity to apply that.
Right.
And it becomes a real thing. And oftentimes when I learn something, I can make it work and I get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I put in a lot of work in terms of transitioning from learning the thing to making it happen and to weaving that into more of a rhythm or routine or a framework or practice. And so, and also I've learned that I should not get excited and say yes to things when I'm excited. And that is something that I'm still struggling with, is that I get excited a lot about lots of ideas that I hear. But it does take a little bit of time to acknowledge that I don't have all the capacity in the world. I have to edit and be selective of what's important.
Yeah.
So
you can't make more time. You can build a lot of buildings as an architect, but you can't make more time.
No.
And it's almost like what you said, you know, you have got a bunch of things that you like, but then because they are somehow interconnected in utilizing your strengths, it's almost like the little example you just showed with the cups on the table. You move your cups just close enough so that a magical inner space appears and you can, you know, create energy in there also. So you somehow found out how to magically make skills and strengths, create more skills and strengths and projects.
And I would say that zest is my best friend, but also my enemy.
Yes, that's the one that wants to say yes in the first 5 minutes.
But no, actually,
I
love you,
then
but
you need the forgiveness to have to, you know, be like, okay, I meant well.
Yes. So I think when I look at these top 5, it reminds me of Inside Out, where you know you have the emotions as different characters. That's a movie, right? Yeah, it's a movie, and it's about, you know, helping kids or just humans to understand how their emotions take the lead, or how they interact with each other. I see these strengths similar in that way. It's like sometimes they're go, oh yeah, I'm leading in this conversation, or like, you know, curiosity takes the lead when I'm like really into, you know, finding out or exploring mode. And so I think there's a dynamic with how these strengths show up. It's never fixed. Like when you print it out on a piece of paper, it looks fixed. But I like to go and have a conversation with curiosity and be like, curiosity, what are you doing? Yeah. You know, like, you know, how do I utilize you at the best of my ability right now, because I am interested in like 3 different topics.
So like you have a chat with 5 Ericas inside of you.
And then like basically, you know, like it's like chess pieces, you like kind of like control them, but in a way that they work with each other as a team. So it's just really interesting when you look at it on paper, I see like characters. Yeah.
That's awesome. I also want to say the program that runs in the background of creating it puts these in an alphabetical order. So it doesn't mean curiosity is number 1 for you. It might actually be perseverance, or who knows. So there's more to give a person a rough overview. Unlike the next 2, I want to actually just dive in on the ocean or big 5. So because you had 2 very high numbers here as well, which is the opposite of the curiosity and the zest. You know, there's well, not the opposite so much, but the conscientiousness is very high. And the J in the INFJ, which is judgmental, which doesn't mean you go around and judge people. It means, you know, that's the person who loves the planning, the predicting, or rather doesn't necessarily love it, but does it so that they can do all the other stuff within the strict framework of the image frame. Conscientiousness is very high too. I remember a while ago, you were like, I said, how do you manage all these projects? I think at this time you were doing a bunch of different things, and they were all equally large and new and crazy, with different peoples and organizational skills required. And you just said to me, well, Jen, that's easy. I have 6 email addresses. And I was like, oh my God. Can I please have an insight?
I don't recommend everyone doing it.
It
works for me.
It did help you compartmentalize those, because you said, even if I do a million things, they don't always happen at the same time. So talk me through a normal week, whatever that is in your life. But how are you able, because I'm sure there will be more and more people watching, whether we just diagnose more people with certain labels, or whether they are simply more aware of that, doesn't matter. More and more people will do a bunch of different things, and they need skills like conscientiousness and perseverance to structure their week. What have you found out so far that works for you? What would you recommend some people, like try this, try that? Maybe a favorite app, or pen and paper, or 6 email addresses?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the kind of the fixed and variable thing, and also talk more about why I became like this in terms of, being an achiever and highly organized. I think it's to do with my cultural background and my upbringing as well. Both my parents were engineers, so they're very much about like structure and like stability and predictability and calculations. And so, and same with my grandparents. They're teachers. They are ship designers and builders, and so there's enough for them to be able to follow in terms of a schedule. And when I look at my strengths and all the factors, and even my disc profile, I can't not think about the idea of nature and nurture. And I think how I became this kind of higher ranger type person is through the nurturing part of it. It may or may not be a natural thing, but I've gotten so used to being organized that I think again it's a superpower, but it's also a way for me to set my foundations so I can play. Yeah,
absolutely.
In terms of, I guess, my tools, I work for myself, and I have a 5-year-old. I have, lots of hobbies. Google Calendar is my lifesaver. And I also actively, for parents out there, if this works for you, I view my son and my family as a project. And I say this with a lot of heart, because when you put your family into your calendar, you prioritize them as much as you do with a project that you're passionate about. And so for me to be able to manage family time within my calendar, I am actively prioritizing them. And so I'm also a very visual person. Like I can go in and see all my color-coded, projects and get an idea of the ratio of where my energy is at that week. And so if I enter a week where I'm naturally feeling like energy low, then I will change the makeup of that week, if that makes sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you block time for certain projects. Like often I'm imagining there will be some things where you have to be in person or in an office, but I also assume there will be lots of times where you are in your home office or in a co-working place on your laptop, and you have to self-manage those time blocks. And that gives you then the power to shuffle them around if life requires you to do that. Let's say if your boy is sick and you need to have extra time to look after him, then you can shuffle some of those office-based blocks around.
Absolutely. So it can be playful, but then there's still like fixed blocks where I can still get things done.
Okay, so for the time and the chunks, Google Calendar is, the king and the queen of your organization. What about the actual, we are running a project, do you have project management tools you like to use, or do you plan it all out in a big, massive Google spreadsheet, or how do you actually navigate this is what I'm doing, what are my next to-dos? Do you have a to-do list and you just shuffle it around based on color codes, or how do you structure that?
I am highly adaptive because I work in teams all the time. So it really depends on the team dynamics. So one team might be just using Google Docs and having to-do lists and tagging everyone. Other teams might have Monday.com, Trello, I'm thinking like ClickUp to track. So I'm highly individualized, and I'm pretty confident in all sorts of different platforms. And I acknowledge that other people may have different communication or leadership styles to me, but I always check like, hey, how do you want to manage this? Because I can adapt to your way of doing it, and I prioritize that. And so I have all types of apps on my laptop, but I switch off all my notifications on my phone because I don't want to be governed by my notifications. If I've got time blocked out using my Google Calendar, I have intentional time to deal with whatever program, app, ways of tracking on there. I do have a manual diary that I scribble notes and to-do lists. It's more for me to remember. Like if I've scribbled something down, I will remember the whole list of things that I need to get done. But that doesn't work for everyone. So I would go into a project management app and then tick that off so the other person can see, or I would send a calendar invite to that person to say, hey, we have a meeting on this day at this time. It's more for them and less for myself. So so I think my approach is very relational and individualized depending on who I work with.
That's amazing. So I always try to be, stubborn about, no, I only want to use this and this, and make myself fit into that to protect my brain and focus energy. But you are clearly able to manage all of those different things and just make sure that as long as your calendar is up to date and your manual way of keeping notes in a conversation or in a meeting, then you're good. Yeah, that works. Beautiful. I would love to have you talk a little bit more about, we briefly talked about your strengths and how they show up. And I maybe take the other outlier from the big five, the emotional stability. I'm with you. I've got 98 or 99 usually in these tests. Most people are not as rock solid. Often the numbers are much lower. You're doing a bunch of different things. It's in every human nature that there's friction, that people might offend you, or people don't have the high standards that you want to bring to a project. There are a million ways for people to get offended, to get nervous, to get frustrated, to have that emotional stability and the Zen vibes just drop. It doesn't seem like this is happening for you. What's the secret? Is it matcha? What is it?
Might be matcha. It's interesting because as you know, I've done my Clifton Strengths full 34. Unlocked it all. I've had my coaching. I'm also a coach. I'm not embarrassed to say that my 34th strength within Clifton Strengths is empathy. I think it's actually a superpower because the way that I show up in communities and complex relationships, it really helps me kind of separate myself with the emotion that is in the room and really deal with the problem at hand.
Oh, I see.
And so I'd never take things seriously or personally. I go, where is that comment come from? I might say, hey, that's not okay to say to me, or I'm very happy to have a conversation about where that language came about or where that assumption came about, but I would never direct it at the person. So it's actually saved me in terms of being in the work that I do and systems change, complexities, in human, social kind of architecture work and kaupapa. And also I think it's something that I have been very conscious of in actively tuning into emotional kind of responses as well. Because knowing that empathy is low on my Clifton Strengths, it doesn't mean that I don't have empathy. So I can again work with it and dial it up when I need to, depending on the person or the situation that I immerse myself in. So again, it's about understanding and actively using it when I need it. Yeah.
And not letting it hijack your amygdala and just go into, reaction rather than proper response and not reactivity, which is a fine but very
And
big
I'm a doer.
difference.
So I'm like, cool, what is a logical way, like highly strategic of like navigating this, but also being able to support the person who is stuck in the emotion.
Yeah, poor people, right? You're just like, oh, so you just called me a beep, but how do we move on from that? And they're just still steaming, and there's like,
it's like, oh, so where did that come from? Like, well, like, talk to me. Like, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a matcha. I don't know. Yeah, just
So you also don't hold grudges.
I usually, I think, again, going back to zest and the positivity, kindness, forgiveness, and VIA strengths is I never wake up with grudges. And I think, again, that is something that I've learned that helped me with my mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see a lot of leaders who take people's problems home or internalize certain things that are going on that are not their problem. And when you spoke about you don't take things personally, it's like you take the least developed strength that most people would focus on. Oh, I don't have empathy. If they did a Clifton Strengths Finder test and see number 34 sitting there with empathy, and they would start talking to themselves in a negative way, and they would shame themselves for not having that as a top or higher skill or strength. But you're saying, well, actually, in what I'm doing, it serves me because I can activate it as needed. It is still a strength. It's just not my most commonly easily accessed tool in my toolkit. So it really is it's a great way that you just talked about. When people look at some of those personality tests, they might zone in on a number that they don't like, and they go, oh my goodness, I don't have this. No, you just don't use it as naturally. You can still activate it, just requires extra effort. And in this case, it even protects you. And it reminds me of the 4 Agreements by, I think, is it Miguel Ruiz? I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but there's a beautiful little book talking about some philosophical strengths. And the second one is don't take anything personal. And it fits in with the beliefs of the Stoics, back in the ancient Greek philosophy of, no, you just don't let it affect you. You can have empathy, but it shouldn't hijack your bigger goals that you're out to do. Speaking of bigger things that you were out to do, when it comes to your interests and passions and projects and workplaces you've been playing with and exploring, you mentioned Pichakucha. What is this for someone who's never heard of that, and what did you do there that was so exciting and it nourished all the strengths that you bring?
Yeah, I think the project that I worked on was very much about. So I guess the format of engagement that I really love is convening a space where people can come along and learn with me, using different ways of communication or storytelling, and leaving them with a sense of belonging, or it sparks some hope. Or an idea, or even foster connection between the humans, right? And so one of the examples is Pachakucha, which is a presentation format which uses 20 slides, and each slide is played for 20 seconds. And so you've got 6 minutes and 40 seconds to talk about anything. It's a very informal way of presenting, but very visual. And so, and I think as a volunteer organizer for Pachakucha for many years, I've learned that there is a power of storytelling, but that comes in many different forms. And it's about creating those opportunities and a platform for people to be themselves. And really be able to kind of, again, giving them enough structure of the 20 slides in 20 seconds to talk about anything. And I felt that was my way to contribute to the city's rebuild, but also to be able to weave humans together and create a space for collective learning as well. So that's, just an example of how all of that kind of shows up in terms of, cities, communities, creating space, connection, collective impact, but also just being human. Yeah.
Wow. It reminds me when you just talked and moved these cups around again and talked about the positive space between spaces. In a way, with Pichakucha having this very strict framework and the speed. I mean, it's not like a TED talk where you might have to spend 20 minutes listening to someone and it builds to this massive peak and so on. It's so much more, 6 minutes 40, right? And in between the structure of here, you got your 20 slides and they are on for 20 seconds each. And then maybe you have a few speakers doing that. And then there's space between where the audience is starting to talk afterwards. Oh, what you thought about this and that. So in a way, you shape with that structure and create another positive space in between those very fixed buildings of the speeches that are presented, the presentations.
Yeah, and one element that I really loved was it was about moving the event to different venues that were emerging in the city. So it's again creating an active way for people to connect with a physical space that they may not have been invited into.
True.
So it's again that kind of that opportunity to make it more visible, that there's cool things, cool venues, cool spaces that people can utilize beyond their event as well. So. Yeah.
And it's a way to showcase those venues as well. Normally, I think the last one I went to was in a museum. And normally you wouldn't think of a TED Talk or a Pichakucha presentation format in a museum. You always think of museum, so, shh, don't touch this, But it was so lively and the topics were just... There's a core guiding theme, but it's so loose that everybody can weave in with certain aspects. So it's very fascinating how it's being curated, and I really enjoyed that experience so much. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Let's go to the books and the people and resources that shaped you. You are like me, you're a nonfiction reader. You want the background talks of people that are doing stuff. You happy to fill people in and talk a little bit about what inspired you or which books shaped your path?
Yeah, I'm not much of a book reader, I have to say. I think the ones that are on my bookshelf are either by people that I already have a relationship with. So I have your book, Courage. And I think for me it's about how do I learn more about the people behind the book through storytelling in this specific format. And I did write, the first one was Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I got the book not because I wanted to read the book. It was more to understand how I can implement it. So after buying the book, I actually enrolled myself to participate in a Dare to Lead training that was facilitated here locally over 3 days to actually interact with others who may have similar situations and can coordinate or have conversations and unpack some of the inner issues or inner challenges that we have. And the book really is more of a visual reminder for me to continue to practice it. And one of the things that I've taken away from the workshop, but also from the book, is who we are is how we lead. And so that really resonated with me as someone who has multiple identities, being Chinese, have ADHD, a woman, living in Aotearoa, New Zealand, married to someone who have Pākehā and Cook Islands kind of whakapapa and lineage, with a multicultural child. What does that mean for me to show up in the world
As a leader?
And so who we are means acknowledging all the threads of identity, and that's the power of how we show up and lead externally. And I think it's more of a visual thing for me to be able to remind myself of those little snippets of stories or quotes, than me reading from cover to cover and tick that off my list.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think, every author, whether it's Brené Brown or others, they only bring their perspective to the game, and it's up to you to then blend it with everything else you've done until the point you're reading the book or watching the movie or going to a course. I like how when you just described what actually was the driver for you reading Dare to Lead or buying the book and then doing the course, and then it's again the sustainable communities that are in partnership for the same goal. In this case, it was having a really high quality standard of leadership and how to show up and how to get people to build things that matter.
And have tools for me to reuse
Yeah.
and for me to kind of digest and and adapt to the situation.
Yeah.
So I like accumulating tools
Yeah.
and be like, oh, how do I combine this?
Yeah.
Then make it work for me.
Yeah. Would you say, in like as you are going through your life and you collect all these tools and different classes and workshops, that there was also a time where you had to discard certain ones or replace them, or do you keep holding on to all of them and somehow make it work? Or have you noticed, so for example, like when I developed this and I'm like, I have to let go of the Gallup or Clifton strengths for this purpose. It felt very sad. It felt like farewelling an old friend because I'm so used to talking about these kind of strengths from that angle. So were there some examples in your life where you went like, oh yeah, I was really obsessed with Trello and then a project management tool, and then I moved over to this, or or maybe a way of leading that you then left behind and stepped into another one?
I never see it as leaving behind or chucking it in the rubbish. It's standby, right? It's like, cool, I'm parking you there, and at some point I will come visit you and draw you out and let's play together. And so I've never thought about letting go of something. It's more like, hey, I probably don't need you for this period of time or on this project, but you're always there for me to use. And again, if we think about a sports playing field, right, there are active players, and the tools are for me to draw on to be like, cool, these 7 or 9 players are very useful for this game. Let's use them.
Yeah, let's go to the reserve
but others,
bank.
others are still observing, but you might switch things out. And so it's very, again, dynamic and playful for me. And sometimes I combine tools and I think it depends on who I'm working with in the project. It needs to be pitched or communicated differently. And sometimes the tools might be similar. So like the VRA and the Clifton Strengths, depending on the relationship and the conversation, you might use VIA versus Clifton. It's all kind of similar, but you get to choose and control the narrative that you're bringing into a conversation. And so, I haven't thought about letting it go, but
this is great. Look, in Clifton speak, my top strength is strategic. So of course I asked you this very leading question because I actually wanted you to make a point that it's not rubbish bin, it's standby, it's parking lot.
Yeah.
And that is so that people who are, just as you, interested in a ton of different things, they often come to me as a coach, leadership coach, and say, yeah, but I could do this and this and this and this. And then I'm like, yeah, but focus and time. And so they often have this fear, if I do not do this, then it will never ever come back again. And you just highlighted the opposite of that point. You're not killing the players on the field. You're just letting them have a little breather. And that's such a healthy way of looking at that. It makes it much more inclusive. It makes it much more balanced, and it doesn't feel like you will never ever get to do this thing again. But for now, I'm focusing on this, and I use that tool or that way of communicating or that presentation format or whatever it is. So,
and for me, tools are always going to be tools.
Yes,
they're not the driving force. Right. It's about how do we make the relationship work or the project work for the betterment of what the vision is, right? What the goal is.
Yeah.
And so whatever tool is really to support that, right? Like I think about people thinking, oh, AI is going to take over the world. But to me, AI is still going to be a tool. No, never in 1,000 years, this is my belief, that it will take over the human brain and how we operate and how we foster relationships, how we kind of create those spaces. And I see leadership tools or reflective tools as tools. And they will always change because the people who create them will be different.
There was a big driver for me to really make it a point and call it the human CV, to have that branding element. I mean, if this was the AI CV, nobody would give a damn. And nobody would care if you were just a hologram or a robot. It's that I would highly recommend people to see AI not as a fear-mongering overlord, but rather a tool. And if it is utilized well, it can create fantastic things. It can create things that we haven't considered yet. And yet AI came out of the human makership. So there is a core element, a foundation of humanistic beliefs, and probably even bias because of that, because whoever programmed the initial iterations had their own ways of looking at things. So we use it well, and I hope we use it in achievement of our goals.
And AI can amplify that.
Exactly.
In whatever form it will. Yeah.
I hope so, yeah. What's something that, because many of the projects and things that you have worked on are in the public eye, there's lots of, big events that you have curated and arranged. What's something people don't know about you?
Don't know about me. I am... It's interesting, like the perspective of you saying that, I'm like, I actually don't do a lot of public-facing events anymore.
Okay.
Probably one or two a year where I'm supporting a bigger, a bigger project. I'm more in the kind of small cohort learning space where I facilitate conversation and hui and deep dive into, say, systems change and intersectionality, community building. And so it's very, very, I guess, hidden in a way because, again, it goes back to my introvertedness and how I like to hold space and create relationships. So, yeah, I think there's definitely a perception of me being very public-facing, very kind of, like leading a lot of public events. But those skills actually translate better when we are intentionally creating quality time with smaller groups of people.
I was hoping you would say that because you're like, but I'm not doing the massive events anymore, except for maybe we had just Open Christchurch recently, and that was a very, very multiple pieces shifting and shuffling, and that was a massive masterpiece in organizational skills. So, but that's exactly where I wanted you to talk about. It's like you can use skills in very large, very big names, or large numbers in attendees, or speaker lineups that are in the 2 digits. However, your skills translate into something that is now even more fitting for who you are and how you get your energy. And that is the deep dives, the quality over quantity. You rather have 10 people in a really well facilitated wananga, teaching space or learning event than having, a 2,000 people TED conference. So
and it has its place, who knows, in the next few months someone might be like, hey, there's this amazing thing that you want to be involved in. I'm very happy to have that conversation. And I think I keep coming back to the human relationships. Like I value like good humans, and I'm inspired by amazing humans every day. I would rather work with amazing humans because I know good projects will come out of it. It's not about the big brands of events or organizations. Like I don't chase that. I chase the good humans, and something will come out.
And they chase you back. You get all these offers from people saying, I saw what you did there. Can you do that for me? So that's the reciprocal nature of human beings. So beautiful. I want to wrap it up with, if people wanted to connect with you, find you, talk to you, what is your preferred way? This time you don't have to adapt to others. I want you to share where is your favorite way for people to pick up the conversation with you.
That's really interesting because I've made an active decision of not growing my network, and I want to, continue to invest in my existing relationships. But if you see me at an event, it means that we have something in common. Or if you see me in a cafe or a public space, say hi, and let's catch up for coffee, because again, one-on-one conversations will hopefully connect us better. But through that, I hope I'm able to connect you with the city and the places and spaces that really gave me the opportunity to learn, which is Ōtautahi Christchurch.
I feel even more honored to have a highly, prized slot in your Google Calendar now. Okay, with that, I want to finish this beautiful Korero conversation and say thank you once more for coming on here and talk about what makes us human.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I acknowledge and also appreciate you as a friend.
Thank you so much.
Kia ora.
Means a lot. Kia ora.